I was just thinking back to like when you phoned me about, I didn't know what the heck you were talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. I was on sick leave, so I'm like, yeah, what the heck am I going to do?
I got time.
I gotta use my brain somehow. I gotta figure it out.
Yeah, what did you think this was about?
I had no clue. I had no clue.
You just showed up because I was like...
Yeah, you had I knew it was an idea, and we're going to talk to people about, I don't know, you're very vague, and I'm very concrete, right? You're like dreamy and floating around, come up with ideas, and I'm like, okay, but how are we going to do this? I'm very pragmatic, right?
Yeah.
So that was part of mine, is just letting go and be like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm straight up sick all the time. So let me create this space to like come in and try to like be a functioning human being once a week or once a month, really, right?
So you had nothing better to do.
I had nothing better to do. I straight up had nothing better to do.
Well, that's humbling. Thank you for that.
So is that why it came to mind? Because you had nothing better to do? You knew I was available? So.
I didn't know that, okay? Yeah. I actually, what I was thinking to have you join me on was exactly that reason, that I see that you are analytical, right? That you have the background in the clinical research side and actually being a pro at helping people with breaking through, right? So you do that for like a living. And I thought, interesting. I'm interested in the story of when people broke through on their own.
Yeah.
But you could then help analyze for the viewer, right, what was going on at that moment.
Right.
That was my thought.
Yeah. Which I think we kind of naturally fell into without even really a discussion.
You'll be the brains, and I'll be the I'll just keep asking the questions, and you'll analyze. And I can tell you this, that I did not want it to be too analytical. So I was like, but without the analysis, right?
But more reflection.
It would just be a conversation.
Yeah.
And I wanted more than just a conversation. So I was like, what if, right? And the reason I do come across as vague sometimes is because I like to see what happens if you just let it be without giving it too much
direction,
bias or too much focus. That's the reason why. People think I'm just trying to be vague or cryptic, but it's more like let's see what comes up instead of influencing it to be a certain way. So I thought, I just trusted the energy. And I think when we first had our first episode, when we were sitting down and talking, I think it was you who went first.
Yeah, that was like our pilot thing.
I think you were the one who kind of really went first.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, hey, when are you going to go? I was like, no, not me. This is for me to help others. And you're like, yeah, so when?
Yeah.
But when you were sitting there, I think Ari was there as well.
Not the first recording. He was there the second time.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody said either to you, but maybe as he saw the first episode, he says, you guys had a very like a natural kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so that's good. But that's maybe just because we could have it. Will it actually happen when we're doing it with a third person?
And so the thing is too, is
that was what I was wondering.
When we're recording that, I didn't even think about that being the pilot, because that wasn't the intent.
No.
The intent was just to like see if we actually could like, I don't know, have a presence, or like if it looked okay, like if there's a flow to the conversation or something, right? Or carry the space, right?
That's actually what I also love about this, is that we didn't get too far ahead on ourselves as to what this is until we found ourselves doing it. So remember, the name even wasn't settled.
Yeah.
We didn't even have the name, and we said we'll call it whatever.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about the name. Let's just keep going.
Figure it out.
And then it'll reveal itself. So I think that was another one really cool thing about this whole experience, was what will it ultimately be?
Yeah.
I also remember just having a lot of reservation about
100%.
Looking at you, or these cameras, and then being online, and what are the people who I know going to think of this? Did you have the same thing?
Well, like that pilot, I sat on it for, I think it was like 5 months or 4 months or something.
Did you?
Yeah, it was a while, guys, wasn't it? It was a good amount of time. I want to say at least a quarter of a year. And that was because when I went into the conversation, it was just like, I don't have a problem talking about those things, right? Because we dove into the sexual abuse stuff, like, but so like that's not something I have a problem. Like, you and I are friends, and we'll talk about this and dig through things and like, unpack what we learned and whatever. And so, but doing that with like in a closed setting,
Right.
amongst, safe people is very
Absolutely.
different than throwing it out online.
Right.
And so there was different things matriculating at the time in my family and this and that. And so I'm like, okay, like if this is going out into the world, like what are the unintended and intended consequences? There's always going to be a consequence to something.
Right.
And so that's when fear, just like, and it's that thing, it's like breaking again. It's like I was literally breaking for the breaking show.
So I could say the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like for me, this has also been one of those. And I remember one of my favorite sort of sayings is like, after the breakdown comes the breakthrough. And I was like, and even our most recent guest who we just worked with, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who has said that I'm his mentor, but another way mentors me back on this very same issue of, hey, just go ahead and get out there.
Right.
And just go ahead and do it. And I remember even Minwoo for many months, we were talking, how many months were we talking about this idea before we even did the first episode? Like
A year?
Yes. It was a year.
Oh, wow.
I remember, and they kept asking me the same questions over and over again. I was like, well, I thought we already covered this. But like, I wouldn't say that. I'd just be like, and they're asking me why. They're asking me, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What kind of motivated me on that line? Because as I'm talking to them, what's driven me has been for years, I keep hearing about people getting stuck. And getting stuck. And I would talk to them like they'd come to you, they'd pay you, they wouldn't pay me. But I don't deserve to be paid. I mean, they would just talk as friends. Or someone would say, can you talk to my son? Or can you talk to my so-and-so? And as I talk to these people, I'd realize that, oh my gosh, in these conversations, and even if it wasn't for a purpose that, oh, will you talk to me so-and-so? It would just be anybody, maybe starting up a business or whatever. And they would have these moments of like doubt and fear and I'd keep thinking to them, but you've already done these things. And they're like, oh, yeah, I have. And I was like, wait a second. You didn't see yourself like this? You didn't see yourself like this. And they would be like, yeah, I guess I could. I go, yeah, dude, if I could do this and I would screw up where you succeeded, what do you got to worry about? Shh, get up and let go. And then they'd come back later and be like, yeah, you know what? That was true. I was like, but you didn't see that. Then I started to realize that so many people don't see that. And I was like, how could we potentially reach a whole bunch of people without going through one by one by one? Like there's just not enough time to reach all these people. And that's when the thought occurred that like, what if we did this? What if we had a show or program, whatever you want to call this, where we would bring in seemingly ordinary people, because it's to the general population.
Yeah.
That's the new word today. The Gen Pop. The Gen Pop sometimes looks at itself as, well, we're called the Gen Pop, so we're not that special.
Yeah, we're ordinary.
Right. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You're amazing. And the Gen Pop, from the Gen Pops, many then continued to spiral down instead of spiral up. And I thought, what's the real difference? And if we could show those who are spiraling down that, hey, hold on a second, really what you're facing is
We all
there's nothing
face the
wrong with
abyss.
you.
We all face it at
There's
some
nothing
point.
wrong with you.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, you don't have to have a degree from here or have this much money or to just everything you got right inside of yourself is enough. And don't take my word for it.
But here's all
Here's
these
another
people
person.
that say this.
And the best part about it I found was that, I might say something one way, you'd say it another way, and all these people would have a different way of saying it, but just through their story. So that's when I said to them, I said, hey, that would be, I don't know, that's my idea.
Yeah.
That's what I think would be different. And it wouldn't be a story, it wouldn't be telling stories about what you did right.
It's like, what did the failure or the struggle
It was,
teach you? Yeah.
not even what were the failures, what were the feelings. That's really, to me, what I aim for when I'm talking to somebody, because those feelings are common all the way through.
Yeah, because the thing of it is like you have these emotions. So like mine was fear, for example. And emotions turn into feelings. And so the things with feelings is they have the capacity to become a story, right? And it's a story you tell yourself.
We tell ourselves. right?
Yeah, and that's the I was going to say pivot, but I know you.
You know,
I
but
know it's a triggering word for you.
No,
It's overused in business apparently.
No, it's fine. But it really is.
That's where you pivot.
They continue to spiral right down.
Yeah.
On that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you make like a different choice and you go a different direction. Like,
Right. So what if we could take these stories and we could show through seemingly very relatable people? That to me is what's important.
yeah.
And the trick to me was, could we get somebody to be relatable on camera? Then that was the next sort of thing in my mind was, could we get, because as soon as like
Because
Riaz
it
himself
takes a
said,
special kind of strength to be vulnerable.
well, so it's one to be
Yeah.
vulnerable, but then to be vulnerable on camera. Like
Right.
yourself, you said, in
Yeah.
a closed, safe setting, it's one thing.
100%.
But without that,
It takes on a life of its own. When
right?
it goes out there.
But then that's another level of challenge that we would have. And if we could do that, then perhaps the listener, the viewer could go, oh my God, they can have real epiphanies from real people, right? Instead of like, this is not a guru of so-and-so.
Right.
This is just an average person. Oh, an average person did this. I'm an average person. I can do this.
it. Yeah.
And that's all really I wanted to see happen. But the challenge was, could I get him to do it on camera? And
Right.
I wonder if that was also your worry as well when you guys were looking at it as well. Could you actually get a person there knowing that they're being recorded? Because people do put up these defenses,
Well,
or
it's a
they know they're
safety,
being
yeah.
interviewed. They look for the right answers,
Yeah.
and then the genuine thing part doesn't come
Yeah.
out. So we wouldn't know that. So what I love about it is that we did a lot of checking at the beginning as to why we're doing this, and we knew that it wasn't going to be necessarily like a cakewalk in the park. That this was going to be, I think, difficult to do. But you know what? And I remember the first days we were planning it. Remember, we'd have to find the time on the schedule. How do we block out 3 hours in the middle of a week? And it was this kind of thing that I wouldn't say dreading, but I was like, ugh, you know, I got things to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But when we did it the first time, I still remember when we got into this episode, I'd see these guys show up and they put all this effort into setting this all up. I thought, okay, here it is. Let's go. Every time after every session that we do of recordings, I come out of there like somehow
Energized.
really invigorated by our guests. And I love their stories. And one of them said, and it got me thinking that I was like, I could stop everything that I'm doing if I wanted to and just do this, and this would be like,
I know. It'd be
this
so
would
fun.
feed you, man. Like,
It
this would be a
so
lot
fun.
of fun.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of like, I feel like where we started from. And our goal, I think, I would say we've come along.
Yeah.
We've come along on our path to really share the stories of where people, they were vulnerable. They did fall down. They did get stuck. They did want to give
and
up.
I just love that, like when we talk to people, and it's so funny, like I know you guys probably see this when you're watching like the playback, there's always like a theme of the day, right? Like there's like, today I feel it was like one of the themes was like knowing what you don't want, or like, you know what I mean?
Do your homework.
Yeah, do your homework, exactly.
Literally like a kid from school, right?
Yeah, like you gotta like do the work behind the work, right? And I just love seeing those themes, and I just find like I love the messaging of it because these are things that we all can develop and we all can do, and we all have the intrinsic capacity to do this, but we don't think we can, or through our lived experiences, like we're taught that we can, or we learned that we can't, or whatever it is. But
honestly,
I think we all have
as
a
much as
capacity.
I have compassion for people that are struggling, I'm going to say this today. Fact. If you put in the work, you'll get there.
That's what I mean.
Fact.
Like everyone has the capacity. Like
Put in the work.
yeah,
And what happens is, and how I'll equate it to,
Yeah.
it's like going to the gym some days. It's raining outside. You've had a long day. You really don't feel like, do I have the energy in me to go to the
Yeah.
gym? But every time you go to the gym, when you come out,
you're like
I'm so
rewarded.
glad I did that.
Yeah, and that's when you
That's
least
what
need
this
it.
is. I feel like breakthroughs are all about.
Yeah.
It's you even know what to do.
Yeah.
You
And it's
even
just-
know what to do.
Yeah, not
But
to
you're
get
like,
locked in
"Ugh,
the
I gotta do this."
experience.
It's like, yeah.
Right? To get locked in it. Like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about like just reflecting on my career, and I remember like really like way back interviewing people from, I don't know what it's called anymore, but it was a center for victims of torture.
Right.
And I just remember learning, like, look, you just hear their stories, right? That I'm just like, and it's just details that, it's just things like humanity is capable of things that we can't even conceptualize here, right? It's just their stories are just so profound. And I just remember learning, I'm like, how are you happy? Like, how are you happy? And I think that's what we forget with some of our privilege that we get here, is that you don't need things to be happy. It's a pursuit, it's a choice. And it's not that they like escape the wrath of fallback that you have to encounter as being a victim of torture. It wasn't that it was an easy walk for them to go through. It was just like, I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just kept planting and just kept going forward. And like, I'd fall back, but I just kept going forward. I fall back, I go forward, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it's just like, and it just shows like how we're so capable of so many things. And I think that's the message I love coming out of that, is like, I learned that early in my career, and then just to see that in fruition through people's narratives. And, because people have like this competitive mindset, and we're actually way more similar than we are different. Way more similar.
Yeah, like when as you were talking about it, I was thinking through every single one of the guests that have come.
Yeah.
And I remember when we first started, we thought we would make this even about business journeys. We were thinking about that. Then we said, you know what? Let's make it about people journeys. Mm-hmm. And they're far more interesting.
100%.
But you know what's amazing is that most of the people we meet are people who we know because we're connected to them in the business world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another sort of really interesting thing, is that we post on LinkedIn, for example, today. And sometimes I wondered, I'm thinking we also had this discussion as well. Like, why do we post on LinkedIn and not necessarily elsewhere? I sometimes ask myself, what does this personal stuff have anything to do with business, with
everything.
Professional development? And it's now only starting to get realized when people talk about mental health and work-life balance. Oh, like it's this big revelation that, the person and the pro are one and the same. They're not two different people. Mm-hmm. And the journeys that they're going through in life are bigger than the journeys that they're going through in business. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it relates. But,
And influence. Not only like it bigger, it influences the business.
Absolutely.
It influences your professional growth.
Absolutely. And, but again, maybe it's because of convention or whatever you want to call it, that we sometimes...
Or we compartmentalize,
Well,
right?
that's what we've been taught by convention.
Yeah.
Is that when you're here from Monday to Friday, you're not you are this other thing. Well, go figure you're going to look forward to Friday.
Because you've emancipated.
Because you're not yourself from Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
So you get to be yourself for like 2 days, 1.5 days of the week.
Yeah.
That's the life you want, really? So, hey, fellow LinkedIn people, by the way, this has a lot to do with us.
Yeah.
And actually, it's the only platform that I'm really on.
It's my only social
that I know how to use,
media
I would say. No, but like I see like so many, I've seen so many people in the world of business struggle through business and repeatedly doing the same things over and over again that they all do.
Yeah.
And I realize we do that in life as well.
Yeah.
So what's the bigger opportunity to tackle, the life or the business? Mm-hmm. And when they get it right in life, it's the exact same applications that they use in their business. These are like, I think,
it's successful
people.
Yeah.
Successful business.
Yeah.
And they use the same principles.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, one of the other sort of drivers on this, I got to give a shout out to Ray Dalio, right? So Ray Dalio, when he talks about, is it Principles? Like, that's his book, right? And his logo was this like little, like it goes down and it goes back up again. So it's about the fall down and then the recovery. Because usually what we see when you look at it from a distance, it just looks like a line that's going like this, but it's actually
success is like.
But it's actually a bunch of this, or like these. Yeah. That's actually what's going on.
Yeah.
So I love that image. What we just see is usually what people see is the point at the end. They don't even see the line.
In counseling, we do it like where it's like a visual of of like you have a neat ball of thread and it's all just wound so beautifully tight, and then you have this chaotic ball of thread that you're just like reeling it in.
Knots.
Yeah, a whole bunch of knots.
So
yeah, you're just trying to sort through it.
Yeah, exactly. So the point I was trying to make was that in what we do, if people could look at these knots that they have and be like, okay, it's a knot.
Yeah.
This is how this one untied it. This is
and
how
go
that
there
one
because
untied it.
that, not because it's comfortable, but go there because that's where there's resistance or discomfort, or that's where you're scared to go, or whatever vernacular.
And you hear the same elements again. Like it was not, it didn't fall into anybody's lap. They had to go get it. There was, you know, there was fear. There was doubt.
Or Dylan was talking about today, like reaching for the opportunity. They're all falling around you, but you got to reach. Right. Yeah.
Oh, and that it doesn't stop. It's not like the person who you're seeing right now isn't nervous. Dylan himself said that just recently, as he was walking into the ring, he's MMA not even the one fighting, and he's nervous. So, you know, it's not something that means you're not successful or means you're not happy. So, you know, just seeing that happen, and I think after doing it for a little while, I remember, was it something Minwoo once said? He said, you know, the first 100 they're gonna suck. They're gonna
the first 100 interviews.
Yeah, you're gonna look at the first 100. Because I remember asking something about that. So what should I expect? I've never done this before. I
had no clue what I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing.
So how is this going to go? And when I was looking into the future, speaking of looking into the future, I was like, so how will this work? He prepared me. He said, you know, the first 100 you're going to look at, and it'll be like terrible. And I do remember there were some times that I'd be coming out of
when you watch them back, I cringe.
Man, what was I doing there? What was I saying? God. How could I, like, even sometimes, like, if I'm bobbling my head a certain way, and I was like, man, you look like, you know, you ever get that way?
Oh my God. Well, the one where I was talking about, like, my chronic pain journey, I listened to that. And so, like, when I hear people's stories, when I'm in like doing in like investigator mode, I'm like, okay, well, what's the chronological lineage of the story after I hear their narrative? And I'm like, okay, here's a piece missing. Here's a piece missing. And when I listen to myself, I'm like, my stories sound like a whole pile of crap because there was like these huge details missing that like put things into context. But if you're listening to what I was saying, it makes it sound like I'm contradicting myself. But like, it just made me aware of like, how like a 7-year journey has so many details. So it's easy to sound contradictory when your experience is just so intense for so long at times, right? And you have to like, and I think that's what you're good at doing is going back and like digging in and being like, okay, well, what's that knot, right? What's that? What's that resistance? What's that spot, right? Because, but like looking back at the interviews, I was just like, oh, I was just
probably one of the challenges I've had along the way. And that I've noticed, and we were just talking about this about a recent episode as well, where we were recording, was, you know, to be curious is natural for me. So that was not the hard part. It was that when I would tug on it, and some would be like, they would let you
unravel,
go. And others would like hold on.
And then jump over again.
And I'd be like, let's try this another way. You can't get in let's go through that window over there. And they wouldn't want to let me into that. And I'd be like, okay, well, you know, then they don't want to. It's okay. But really, inside that room is like a lot of gold, I feel, for everybody else. And I'd be like, oh, man, if everybody could just see this, if you would just share this, it would be so amazing for people. But, you know, sometimes that was probably, if anything, was when I look back, I was like, okay, how do we get better at really creating that flow? That was sometimes like the biggest thing I'm just trying to pay attention to, is creating that flow from where they're starting, where they're going, and being mindful of them wanting to go somewhere. Maybe because they came in, all they got was, hey, we'll think about these things. Everybody conjures up some
expectations,
way, of how it's going to go. And so they try to take it that way, whereas we're like, well, here's something really interesting. Let's just stay here for a little while.
And it's usually something that they skip over that they think is kind of mundane.
Every time. So then it's kind of like then us working together on getting them through that part, and making it like obviously then relatable. So that's been something that I'd like to think, you know, over time. It's obviously if you pay more attention to it, you start working on it, right? But if there's anything I'd look into the future for to see, you know, what could we be doing differently, is I would love to see, you know, like right now we're getting guests that are, that are from Gen Pop, right? And what they're saying is like, yeah, we're just average people. I can't wait for the day, and I really believe it's out there, that we get people who are not from Gen Pop who say we're Gen Pop.
What do you mean?
What do I mean by that?
Who are not Gen Pop people?
So like, let's just say, for example, like I think we're getting there already. Like, for example, Dylan, somebody like Dylan, right? Who, he's not Gen Pop. And he even said, he made a reference once to saying, I'm back into Gen Pop. Because they know they're in another caliber.
Another level, yeah.
Right? They're another caliber. But if a person at another level admits and says, no, actually, there aren't levels.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. It's just experiences.
Yeah. And I've never really looked at people who are at another level as being at another level.
That's just where they're at. Yeah, everyone's at their place.
There was another reference made today about like, I want to go do a job that I might never do.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
So, actually, that's putting food on the table for people. That's putting food on the table for people. So actually,
I just love that because you just learn so many different things.
But then there's a moment of humility that came after that where the guy actually slapped his own wrist and said,
why did I do that? Yeah.
Whoa, what was that? Don't do that again.
Yeah.
So just like that, I would love to be able to see honesty. That level of honesty
too, is like
from people that are like seemingly successful to say, hey, hold on a second.
Or do you know
but
the
you know
other
the risk
too?
that they run though, right?
Yeah, because like everyone could weaponize it, right?
So now why would I buy your book? Because you're pretty average, right?
Yeah.
Like why would I buy your book?
Yeah.
And those people, believe it or not, they suffer. They go through the same anxieties, maybe greater, like the intensity of their anxiety might be even higher because they're stuck in this persona that if I let out who I really feel like, then, okay, for example, recently, here's who would make an interesting host, a guest. I'll tell you right now, and he's Canadian, Justin Bieber. You know why?
Why?
He just recently called it quits, right? What? Like, you don't do that if you're Justin Bieber. Why would you do that? I would be so curious to know, like for him to share that experience because first of all, okay, he's Canadian. He's a huge, Leaf fan. Like people can relate to him in that sense. He's a local kid, right? And if you look at his story, like where he started from, how he was kicked out of, like he wanted to be part of a band and they said, you can't hang with us.
Yeah, you went on YouTube and
then he crushed it. Can you imagine being those guys like who said no to Justin Bieber? But the point is that now when he's at this peak and he's like seemingly all this, he's like, I'm stopping. Or you hear this happening a lot in the world of tennis players. Recently, in the world of tennis, for example, like tennis players simply saying recently, especially it's been happening a lot in women's tennis, I noticed, and sometimes in men, that, they're saying, I don't feel like my game is on. Something's not right with me, so I'm not going to play. PK Subban, another one in hockey. So when these people come out and they say, I could see them coming here, having a conversation with us about like, yeah, man, like this is, I think that would be inspiring stuff.
I think the deeper part of the conversation though is so like we have like the breaking moments, which is, it's kind of like one level to it, but then if you go to another level of breaking, it's the sometimes you call it the dark night of the soul or the shadow work, or you see it in later parts of life if you look at it through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the level of self-actualization, where people start to like really look at what did I put out into the world? What does that mean for me? And like what are the attributes? Like, so say we all have dark and light attributes, if you were to label it like that, positive, negative, whatever. And so let's say like I can be really manipulative, right? But it's like, what do I do with that? That's manipulative is a dark trait about me. That's a dark quality to manipulate people. But what do you use that for? What's the intention you're using it for? What ripple does that create in the world when you put that out there? And so I'm really getting curious about the duality of things, and that just because something is a negative or dark attribute that we have, what we do with it is is what's powerful with it, right?
Oh,
like,
that reminds me, actually, on that, is even speaking to, for example, people that have been incarcerated, for example.
yes.
Right? Or, like the example of Dylan as well. Like, he was sent to the principal's office. Same thing, right? There was something dark, not right, and he's sent there for it.
But he had this mischievousness that was something that was his gift.
Right. So that would be some sort of interesting things to look forward to into the future. I remember even saying, actually, to Minwoo once, talking about this, right, that there would be people who we would try to talk to who might even be in that state right now, and as far as like doing their time and going there and having a conversation with them, because that's where the moments right after the breakdowns and the breakthroughs start happening, right? Imagine if we could, through our discussion and conversations, share with people such thoughts, and all this going on right now when the Dahmer thing is like trending really high.
Like, what's up with the Dahmer?
Anyway, but the point is that
it's like a big thing now.
Honestly, I'm watching it with my kids, and I'm using it as a study material, and I'm like, guys, here's what to pay attention for, because it could be something just like that tips you in this way or the other. I think that's what they're trying to do, right? At least in the earlier episodes. So, imagine how many people could be saved from doing something that would then end them up in these places, right? And how much of a better, parallel life they could be having, like you said, if they avoided this or used what could be dark for light. And I think that's another place that we could go.
Or step into it, right? Yeah. Explore, get curious about it. Don't judge it. That's the difference, is curiosity, not judgment, right?
Yeah. Dark to light. I like that. I really do. And I think that's something that we constantly have already seen, but to see more of that and making that a focus.
Yeah. And that we're not all one or the other, right? We flow between the two.
Yeah. I think that, again, back to that, like that symbol, right? Of
the yin yang is the representation of that as well.
Yeah,
right?
it's similar to that. Yeah, very much. So that's the point, is that sometimes there's this imbalance in that moment, and that's the fall down. And then you regain the balance, and that's the breakthrough, right? So, but this time the rebalance is that much more stable because it's been stressed, tested from that point of view now.
There's a confidence attached to it,
Yeah. So, when people will say to themselves, never again will I do that, right? They've learned that balance is that much stronger now, but it didn't come without first cracking a little bit or falling down.
Yeah.
So that's what I hope to see again happen in the future. I think we also would love to see, maybe instead of just one person, we just talked about having
like a group of people who influence and nurture each other.
Similar paths, and maybe that might also make them feel comfortable also.
Yeah.
Because there are three of them talking about it versus one.
Yeah.
And some of the topics, one person might be a little bit quieter about it sometimes, and then the other two might be quieter while one's talking. And that just allows them to kind of at least take that pause and not have to be the center focus of what we do, of what we talk about, but relatable. I've seen others kind of talk about the same sort of, or handle it the same way. But I just think there's so much depth in one person.
Oh, there's so much.
When one single person is looking at three people, they'll look at it like, well, it took three people to solve that. Whereas when one person looks at one person, it took one person to solve that. So I think there's benefits both ways. So
I just love listening to people. So there's so much.
And I love our name now.
Breaking?
Yeah, breaking. So I
like the cracked glass. I thought that was so cute.
Yeah. But
I'm like, that was
do you remember
really cute.
last time when we were sitting down talking about this, I remember breaking sounds like, again, you want to take dark to light interpretations of breaking. So breaking to me could be
breaking down
or breaking something or breaking through. But what I liked about breaking was breaking down, even saying breaking down doesn't have to be negative, because I was thinking in our math class once upon a time, remember when you take a complex situation, you break it down.
Yeah.
So breaking down actually would mean simplifying.
Right.
So even the word breaking down, if you really look at it a different way,
and then once you change your relationship with it, it's not that you ever welcome it because it's incredibly uncomfortable. But I know, like when we were speaking with Amber about this, like because she and I had similar perceptions, and I remember I was talking like And like when something chaotic would be happening in our teenage years, and I would be like, oh, I wonder what this is going to teach me. Like,
Yeah.
And you were like, what are you talking about? But like we had childhoods that were like just, ensconced with little like storms of chaos at times, right? So like you just, you acclimate to that, and you're like, okay, well, I've gone through this, like I'm going to get through it. Don't know how, but you're going to get through it, right? And I think that's what you begin to learn. And like adversity is not a bad thing. Adversity is not a bad thing, and struggle is not a bad thing.
It's amazing how many times I've talked to people who seem to have it all together. And, after a little while of conversation, you realize that, wow, they got just as scared.
Yeah.
They really felt the adversity. Mm-hmm. They just, maybe we didn't notice them feeling it.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, so you do feel it as well.
Yeah.
And they're not looking at it going, yeah, that was easy for me. That was not easy for me. So I really think that just continuing to go down that path, I think we have a long, long way to go as far as how many people we could actually, what I'm curious to see is how many different ways there are.
To do the same thing or have similar outcomes.
To get back up.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people look at their situation, and I notice this in business as well. They're like, oh, but my situation's different.
Right.
I'm like, okay, covered. My situation, that's been covered. How many times have we all looked at people on our, like here, the guys that are on it going, yeah, I can relate to that person, right? So, but we still hear more people out there going, but my situation, and one day I would love to see like people finally starting to realize that it's not the circumstance that matters, right? It's the certainty that matters, and that's it. So,
and it's hard to keep that certainty when you don't have comforts in life, right? And that's the that's the hard part.
So lots to look forward to.
Yeah,
I'm still looking forward to doing this. How about you guys?
100 episodes.
Well, let's.
Oh my God.